Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. PsychicTarot.ca, book your tarot reading and unlock your spiritual journey. And the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to Season 5 and episode number 674 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. 100% Canadian. Today, recording day is Friday, June 20th, 2025, and I'm not sure what kind of day it's going to be here. I see two little clouds, but I don't see any sun, so not quite sure what's going on here. Because when I see clouds and no sun, and the sky isn't completely cloudy, I'm kind of wondering where's the sun, because usually at this hour it's shining on my face and you can see it on the screen. So, yeah, I'll have to check to see what's going on out there after the show. I am your host, the Eager Beaver. Pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A. And with me, yay, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Got a good show for you today, Mr. Grizzly. How's your mental health today, sir?
Well, I might be a little tired and grumpy this morning because I failed to pick up coffee on a grocery run yesterday, and I have none in my home. So I'm coffee less this morning, which tends to make me a little this.
Okay.
Thoughts don't come easily, and I'm still kind of half asleep because I didn't sleep well, even though I went to bed very early. Yeah. So, how's my mental health? After I've had a cup of coffee, which will be in about an hour and a half, I'll let you know.
Okay. I know we were talking before the show there that sleep hasn't been all that great.
No, and I have a doctor's appointment this morning, so I'm going to address that with him and say, listen, I can fall asleep easily. I don't stay asleep.
That's my problem.
And it's really, it ain't easy. It ain't easy. So, yeah.
All right. Kids and cubs. For me, doing better today. Yesterday, I was a little frustrated because, as you know, I had my medical appointment and I was trying to achieve a couple of things yesterday. And I was thwarted, like left, right, and center. So the appointment went well. Good news. I do not need to have surgery.
Oh, that's good.
So it seems that everything, I was a good enough beaver, and I was able to keep everything okay. And they also said that there's a whole bunch of muscles and whatnot that's helping to keep stuff in place. I no longer have to sleep with the boot. Yes, but it's going to be still a while yet. They showed me the X-ray, and the break is like it didn't break through, but it was torqued and twisted. So the gap in the bone is pretty big. And while 40 days is what they say for bones to heal, the entire space won't be filled up with whatever new bone is in 40 days. That will take a little longer. So my hopes of being back on the tennis courts sometime in July and running is probably going to be delayed until like August or something. I'll still be able to like get on the court and like have a gingerly hit, so long as I don't try to, run full speed for a ball that's going out wide. Um, so, if somebody wants to hit to me or in my vicinity, I could practice uh, but I'm not going to be much of a match. I'm not going to be much of a match, but it might still be nice to get on the court. But yeah, it's not going to be a quick, full recovery, which may affect some vacation plans because my beaver sweetie and I were thinking of going hiking, perhaps in the mountains of Romania at some point. The mountains of Romania is not like taking a hike in the Gatineau Hills. Let's just put it that way. It's a little more involved and way higher once you get to the top, um, and longer walks. So, not exactly sure that my foot will be able to handle it by the time we were thinking of going. So I might have to reorganize some things or just not go this time around, which would be a little sad. So, that part went well, and then I was supposed to go for some blood work, and it seems that everything is paperless now, and my name was not in the computer system, so I could not do blood work. And you have to understand that, um, for those of you who walk with crutches, when you go out a very, very long time on crutches, at some point, everything just gets tired. So yesterday was the longest by far. I was alone on crutches. So when I got to the hospital, first of all, I went to the wrong hospital for the first one. I went to the same hospital where I went when I broke my foot, and they said, "No, no, you have to go to the day unit one," which wasn't far, but not walkable on crutches. So I got there a little late, and they brought me in, but I got in, had to go all the way to the seventh floor to register, and then back down for a new set of X-rays, which was on floor zero, and then back down to floor. It's like, my arms, they're tired. And then I tried to go get my COVID shot, and the first pharmacy I went to had run out. And then the second pharmacy said, "We're doing it. We're only by appointment." And then I looked to see when there were appointments, and there are no appointments until, well, by the time we got to mid August, I gave up. So, looking at the calendar. So I set out to do three things yesterday. I got one done. I was gone around 8 o'clock in the morning, got back around 12:30. So that's like 4.5 hours of walking around and crutching when the most I've done is maybe about 15 minutes. I am sore. I am very, 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 very sore. Like a lot of pain. All my muscles are screaming at me, going, "What the hell did you do?" But on the upside, I can start weight bearing on the foot, on the heel. I can't do the full roll down because once you get to this part, that's where it hurts. But I can do this. So once everything gets tired with crutches, I can sort of like just like put the crutches down and sort of like gingerly put my foot down and walk a little bit. So that's why I was able to do more yesterday. Um, but again, when you're walking like that, you're compensating in other parts. So yeah, after about like four or five, let's say about 4 or 5 blocks of walking by putting my heel down a bit and bearing a little weight, my knee, because my knee is not supposed to be in that position when I walk, was like going, "Okay, that's enough now. You need to stop now." And then it was like, "Okay, now what do I do?" So I stopped for lunch because I wasn't gonna make any more distance. And that gave me a little break, and then, I cabbed the rest of the way home at some point because I was like, "Yeah, I'm done now. I just wanna go down and sleep because I'm very, very, very tired." So, yeah, a day in frustration. I was really hoping to, string together because they were all, like, within, like, a 2-block radius that I could do all these 3 things, and it's like, "Yes, denied, denied." But, at least I gave my other leg a little bit of work out because, oh my god, it is so small compared to the other one. It's ridiculous. So yes, I get to start building the leg back up a little bit too, which will be good and which will help with the return to the tennis courts. And if I can rebuild it uh, well enough and quickly enough, and I'm not afraid of physio. I've been through this process before with the other leg when I had to learn to walk all over from scratch. So hopefully I can rebuild it enough to add some extra endurance, and that will help. But yeah, yesterday was just all I wanted to do was 3 things, and only got 1 done. And I was late for that one. Oh, well. Kids and cubs. Uh, as you know, uh, June is Indigenous Peoples History Month, and tomorrow, Saturday, and we won't have a show because it's the weekend, is National Indigenous Peoples Day. So I hope that you will be able to celebrate in some way. It takes place on the summer solstice, of course, the longest day of the year, because for many generations, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities have celebrated their cultures, languages, and traditions at this time of year. The summer solstice holds deep spiritual significance and cultural significance for many Indigenous peoples, marking a time of renewal, connection, and celebration. And kids and cubs, if you are interested in marking the occasion in some way, I'm going to put this in the chat here, and I'm going to put it on screen. If you use this URL here, it will bring you to a Government Canada site that lists all the activities from coast to coast to coast happening for National Indigenous Peoples Day. So please take a gander at it. And if there's anything in your community that you would like to attend, please join into the celebration. All right.
Cool.
Grizzly, you have something off the top that doesn't really have anything to do with the theme, and I couldn't really figure it out how to work it in elegantly. So I'm just going to let you take it right now.
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand with what you just spoke about,
Okay.
Indigenous Peoples Day, and I'll tell you why it goes hand in hand, because the Indigenous peoples of Canada were and have been a marginalized group that's been pushed to the side for centuries, right?
Right.
We stole their land, we enslaved
Yep.
them, basically. Anyway. So
Reservation system, all
yesterday
that.
in the United States of America, it was Juneteenth,
Yes.
which is a national holiday.
Yes.
And what did the orange bimbo shithead racist piece of human garbage write?
Oh, no.
Too many non-working holidays in America. It is costing our country billions of dollars to keep all these businesses closed. The workers don't want it either. Soon we'll end up having a holiday for every once working day of the year. I don't know what every once working day of the year means. It must change if we're going to make America great again. Funny how he wrote that on Juneteenth.
Yeah, really. Does he not realize then when people are not at work, they still live? They go places, they spend money. Maybe they'll go to a movie instead. Maybe they'll do an outing. Maybe
The
they'll do some
irony of that
tourism.
statement from this shithead, though, too many
I know.
non-working he's played golf
Golf.
33 times.
Yeah. I know. I know.
Costing the taxpayer millions upon millions for each golf outing.
Yes.
33 times he's played golf this year.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He plays at his courses, which means that all the security, he gets all the profit from that.
Yep.
Because he's completely ignored the emoluments clause.
Yep.
It's just a big grift. The whole thing is a grift.
Unbelievable, that man.
That's the thing. Juneteenth, and he makes that statement.
But typical, right? Because every holiday, well, at least he didn't do his typical thing. Happy Juneteenth, except for everyone.
Yeah.
These people and these people and these people and these people that I hate. Right. But yes, I know. Just that falls right in there. Well, and on top of that, the non-working and the lazy part associated with Black people, welfare queen, the whole. It's just this dog whistle that you can hear so far away.
It's just who he is.
Yeah, he is. He won't change.
No.
Swiss cheese brain, What can you say? Yeah. Glad you brought that up, Mr. Grizzly. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it does tie in, actually.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Yeah.
I know what I'm doing.
I got Christian here from a Slav who's never worked for a living.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you said it. All right, kits and cubs.
Well, and
Uh, before we get into it, oh, unless you had something, Mr. Grizzly.
well, it's from Cat W. Sounds like Ford.
Yeah,
Doug
indeed.
Ford's commentary.
We'll get into him today.
Yeah.
Just to address something, because I've seen the comment in the chat many times, and sometimes the show goes down and I didn't have a chance to address it. I know people have wondered in the past, just if you're newer to the show as well, whether or not I'm Indigenous because, the earrings
Mhm.
that I wear and stuff like that. Um, it's a complicated answer. I do have Indigenous blood in my DNA, both on my mother and my father's side. Mi'kmaq on my father's side, Huron on my mother's. I was not raised a single day in the culture. I have no claims whatsoever, right? Um, I was raised to be proud of the fact that this is in my blood, but that's the extent of it,
Mhm.
right? Same thing as I was raised to be proud that there's black in my blood, but I was not necessarily raised in black culture either, right? Um, yeah, I'm more of a francophone.
Mhm.
Right, in terms of the way I was raised. But it's a subject I'm passionate about, of course. And it is, there is one thing, um, I hope I'm allowed to say this. Not- but one of the most precious thing that I have in my possession, is this here. It's wrapped in red, which I was told when it was given to me uh, is the color of life force. And in it, I hold this and I cherish it very much. I was given a feather because I've had an opportunity to do um, some work uh, within the community, not as a member of the community, of course. I worked with Health Canada for a time, and some of my jobs that I've had over the course of that time had to deal with the Indigenous community. So that's the extent of my link. Um, I have no claims whatsoever. Always defer. But yes, the little bit of knowledge that I have of the community comes from work experiences that I've had, not through anything I was raised or imparted down to me through to my family or anything like that. So it's a long and complicated answer, as they often are with this. But yes, you know, if you did a 23andMe type thing, you would see something, but that is literally the extent. No knowledge, wasn't raised with any stories, wasn't raised with any medicines, wasn't, I'm a French Canadian boy,
Mm.
right? And that's how I identify more as a French Canadian. But yes, all of this stuff is in me as well as, some Irish and French. And, both my parents are mixed race. So, by the time you get to me, I'm a mutt. So, so just for those who were wondering, but yeah, not not identifying, no claims, nothing of the sort. But I do have a little bit of familiarity that I've picked up along the way. So just wanted to be transparent about that because I've seen the question asked several times in previous chats, and given that it is the day coming, I figured it was a good opportunity to actually answer the question. So there it is. Kids. Oh boy. Okay, there's a lot going on. Um, Yesterday, Bill C5 cleared the committee stage, and it seems that there is a big push to get it passed through the House today. It seems to be expected that that will happen unless there is something extremely out of the ordinary which takes place. Uh, As you know, there are some issues with it. A lot of people are calling it essentially some trust me legislation. And we will have a clip here from Althea Raj coming up that explains what it is. Her main objection is to it, particularly, and there's some potential for corruption in the way that this bill is written at the moment. My personal view about legislation, and this is applies to all parties, whatnot, is that when legislation is written, it should be always drafted with a duty of concern and a duty of caution and care and thoughtfulness by the government of the day, regardless of its stripe, because the powers that a bill will convey will be left behind for the next government, because governments eventually fall. And the next government may potentially be formed by a party that the government of the day that granted itself those powers finds most dangerous. And therefore, bills should not be written by a government of the day to make life easier for itself first, but with the safeguards in it that whatever powers they confer will be very, very well circumscribed in case a dangerous government comes along. Some of the bills that are being proposed now do not necessarily meet that test. C2, C4, and C5 have some issues with them that have been brought up and that are legitimate issues of concern. And these bills probably could benefit from some extra time to get the wording right, precisely right. With that, um, it's really interesting with Bill C5 because if you saw at issue last night, you have Althea Raj and Andrew Coyne, who are pretty much on the opposite sides of the political spectrum,
Hmm.
both in violent agreement with each other that if the conservatives had tabled this bill as it is written currently, liberals would be running around with their hair on fire.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? So there is a bit of an issue. One of the problems I had with Stephen Harper as prime minister was his fetish for expediency.
Yeah.
Mark Carney seems to have a certain similar fetish for expediency. Now, with Stephen Harper, the fetish for expediency was because he wanted to transform Canada in certain ways. That famous quote, "You won't recognize Canada when I'm done with it."
Hmm.
And he wasn't intending that in a good way.
No, not at all.
We don't know Mark Carney well enough to know. We have to be honest, right? He appeared on the scene. We've known him as a banker, but as a politician, right? He appeared on the scene, got a quick thing, leadership race, quick election. So we don't really know, really. Because a lot of people have placed his trust in him. I go, I trust Mark Carney. And same thing in British Columbia with David Eby with his the two bills, bills 14 and 15, I believe it is. I trust David Eby. Yes, I know, I understand. You may trust David Eby and you may trust Mark Carney, but when they leave, that legislation remains, and someone else can use it. Now, Bill C5 specifically has a sunset clause within it that it is set to expire within 5 years, but a mandate is 4, and a minority government can be less. So, should something happen along the way and this government falls and gets replaced within 5 years, that could be a problem. Elizabeth May of the Green Party had suggested an amendment to make the sunset clause happen in 2 years, which might have been a good idea in this case, given a minority parliament, but that was rejected. So that's a little bit of laying the ground because I don't want to give too much because we have some things in the clips that have more. But Mr. Grizzly, if you have the clip from Althea Raj from
Yeah, I'll
issue.
show that in just a second. I just wanted to make
Okay.
a comment in regards to expediency. The thing about Stephen Harper was he was a seasoned politician.
Yes.
Mark Carney is a seasoned businessman
Yes.
and an international banker and an individual who understands diplomacy in the boardroom, which is why he's able to handle Trump so well. Because Trump is not a politician and he's barely a businessman. He's a child. So in this instance, I think the expediency is because he's coming from the private sector, from a lifetime of private sector, and he wants to get things done quickly for Canadians. I don't think he has ill intent to harm, do irreparable harm to the country or its citizenry. However, I don't like this bill at all.
There's a blind spot there.
I don't like it at all. And as I've said from day one, there's no politician I will see eye to eye with on everything ever. It's never going to happen. I don't like this bill. And yes, the Conservatives had tried to pass this. The Liberals would be running around screaming.
And here's the thing. The Conservatives are all in on this.
I know.
Which should raise a red flag or two.
It should make you go, wait, what?
There are powers in this bill that the Conservatives will love to get their hands on.
Yes. So I'm not a fan of it at all.
Yeah.
Again, I've read through it and I don't fully understand it. I don't. I'm not a lawyer, and it's written with a lot of legal speak. We need to have basically a communique that brings it down to an understanding that the average Canadian can figure out. A communique may come, but whether this bill gets passed or not, it's concerning to me.
Okay.
So I'll share the clip here from Althea and talk about it on the other side.
Althea, I was teasing you because you've written on this a couple of times, so I'm going to start with you. What do you think is behind the speed at which the Prime Minister is pushing this legislation through, and I guess what is your biggest concern?
Well, I think they want to have a big win before Canada Day. I think they want to free themselves from some of the laws that they feel currently impede their ability to greenlight projects fast. What concerns me is that this is legislation. It's not just enabling legislation. Some of the concerns that Indigenous groups that you just aired have could easily be fixed by making consultation very clear and obligatory in the factors the government must consider, because it just says at the moment, may consider. Some of the language could be tightened up to make the bill a lot less vague, and that would go a long way to quell some of the concerns. My concern is the precedent that it creates. This bill basically says that Cabinet can decide to just omit certain laws from consideration from applying. So this is basically, as one senator put it to me, trust me legislation. The government is saying, don't worry, because we're going to pass this law and we're going to enact it properly and your concerns are going to be allayed. Don't worry about it. But we are creating a framework that allows any government, it could be this government, it could be a future government, to just bypass the will of Parliament, to bypass laws that have been debated, in some cases over several years and passed, and to vest the power in one individual to say, these are the conditions or zero conditions I'm going to place on one project is rather insane, frankly. Like, imagine the corruption that could potentially be enabled by legislation like this. Like, it is so problematic that it deserves more than 2 days of study. It could easily sit through next week, the House, or the week after, so that the Senate can consider their amendments and have them approved by the House. There is no need to rush this because these projects are still going to take years to build. So taking the summer to get this right, it makes you wonder what is the rush? What does the government not want us to see?
Right. According to Kitland, I am here in the chat, says the committee did successfully add some amendments to the bill specifying laws that it can't circumvent, including the Indian Act. Good that certain amendments were there and accepted. That's good to know. But the bill as originally tabled was like that. Now, there is some question, again, because of how fast these bills were presented, whether or not, because, these bills are drafted by the public service and then they go through and whatnot, whether or not some of these bills, C2, C4, C5, were drafted with the thought that a conservative government would be coming in, because all the polls were indicating that, and that's the first draft that they're working with. Um, and this did not necessarily originate in this form from um, from the Liberal Party itself. So it's good to see that there was amendments passed yesterday, and I will find some news about that and to be able to read it into the record. But as it was presented initially, and as Althea Raj is mentioning here, pretty concerning. The one about corruption specifically is if only one person is designated as per being able to approve, that lets everybody know where to give all their attention in terms of lobbying and perhaps gifts.
Mm.
So that's in this age of foreign interference and whatnot, some better safeguards around that would probably be welcome. Maybe, perhaps. So that's sort of Althea Raj's point of view. And now we have Andrew Coyne's coming at from another way. But yeah, they basically get to the same point in some way.
Just trying to cue it up here.
Oh, okay.
To annoy both the left and the right on this. So on the one hand, progressives can be upset, and rightly so, that a single minister can basically waive laws passed by Parliament that were presumably passed with good reason, and if not, they should change the laws. But also people on the right, at least principled conservatives, which apparently doesn't include the Conservative Party of Canada, would be upset by the huge discretion given to a single minister to basically pick winners, the potential for cronyism, certainly the departure from any kind of, even-hand market approach to things. I think there's a large body of opinion that would say we need to do something to speed up the approvals process for these things. Some of these legislation are probably too onerous, have too many requirements, et cetera. Fine, let's do the hard work of fixing that process generally for all projects, not giving a favored few a kind of a fast track in based on criteria that who knows what. I mean, you can set out the broad criterion in the legislation, but it's up to the minister basically to decide how and when they're going to be applied. That's different than having Parliament pass a law saying this specific project is going to go ahead because we've decided in a transparent way that it meets certain tests. So it's assigning a huge amount of discretion to one minister. On top of which, it's not just C5. There's 3 bills now that the government's put forward, and they have several things in common. One is they're all omnibus bill. They yoke together vastly different types of legislation and demand Parliament pass them at one go. Secondly, they often involve, in a couple of cases, violations of privacy rights or individual rights that the government seems quite high-handed and unconcerned about. And thirdly, they involve trampling on the rights of Parliament. This is right. Henry VIII legislation is this kind of thing. Henry C5 is called. Basically, is empowering cabinet to just ignore Parliament. That's not what our system is supposed to be about.
So again, Andrew Coyne, more of an institutionalist, right? As conservatives, classic conservatives, tend to be, throwing some shade on the Conservative Party too. In that response, also concerned, right? So there's a lot going on with this bill. Now, as I mentioned, yes, it went through a committee process here, and I was looking for to see if there was an article that would have listed the amendments that were approved, but I did not necessarily see that one. But there was a Toronto Star article that talked about Mark Carney's government reviewing suggested changes to the infrastructure bill. So before these might have been approved, although it was updated a few minutes ago. So maybe there's something here. So I will look at it here. It's by Alex Ballingall, the Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief. who says the Liberal government is reviewing a series of changes to add oversight and restrain some, but not all, of the extraordinary powers created under its controversial legislation to fast-track major development projects. The proposed law, Bill C-5, has sparked warnings of Indigenous resistance in the coming weeks, along with condemnation from environmental groups and some reservations within the Liberal caucus. But the government insists the legislation is necessary in the face of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs after the Liberals won a minority government in the April 28th election, while promising to supercharge economic growth and reduce Canada's reliance on the unpredictable United States. Now, again, it's necessary. We need to move fast. We need this. Like, these are all explanations and justifications, but it still doesn't absolve one of doing the job the right way. Declaring the need for speed to get new projects like mines, ports, and pipelines approved for construction in less than 2 years, Prime Minister Mark Carney's administration is ramming the bill through the House of Commons over the objections of opposition parties this week, with votes anticipated today, on a host of amendments proposed during a marathon parliamentary committee meeting that just finished after midnight Thursday morning. Speaking to reporters on Parliament Hill, Liberal House Leader Stephen McKinnon said the government was reviewing the proposed amendments and that he expects the bill to pass in the Senate next week after it goes up for a vote on third reading in the House on Friday. So far, the bill has passed at a rapid clip through the Commons with the support of Liberal and Conservative MPs, with the Bloc Québécois New Democrats and the Lone Green MP opposing it. Asked about the bill Thursday, Carney was adamant the process it creates will respect Indigenous rights and include, quote, the full embrace of free, prior, and informed consent, a key provision of the United Nations Declarations of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. He insisted it will ensure participation and consultation with Indigenous communities in choosing and reviewing projects to fast-track, including for environmental and other conditions the developers will need to follow. Quote, consultation, cooperation, engagement, participation is at the heart of C5, Carney said, and that is how you build a nation, and that's very much how we've designed it. Provincial laws seeking to fast-track development under the specter of American tariffs have also faced criticism in recent weeks, including Ontario's Bill 5 that prompted allegations the government is infringing on Indigenous rights. As written, the federal law includes measures to reduce federal barriers to trade and labor mobility within Canada. The criticism has centered on the other part of the bill, and people have been asking for the bill to be split. Right, the part on labor mobility, let's just pass that, but let's spend some time on the second part. The criticism has centered on the other part of the bill, which aims to create a special process that gives the federal cabinet the power to choose and fast-track development projects it deems to be in the national interest. The current version of the law says the government may consider any factor it sees fit and gives the federal government the power to skirt laws and regulations, including environmental protections, used to assess chosen projects for approval. The bill says the framework to choose projects to fast-track will expire after 5 years. The opposition parties' amendments include measures to increase parliamentary oversight of how the law is used. One proposed change calls for the creation of a special committee to examine how the law is being applied, similar to the body of MPs that was automatically created when the federal government triggered the Emergencies Act to quash the so-called Freedom Convoy in February 2022. Other amendments would require the government to disclose documents it uses to choose whether a project gets fast-tracked, publish an advisory 30 days before bringing a new project into the process, and release a report on Indigenous consultations 60 days after a development is authorized through the new law. The proposed changes also aim at the special powers the bill would create, with amendments to limit which laws the federal cabinet would be allowed to skirt in the name of approving a development project. One of the amendments says the government would not be able to do this when Parliament is dissolved or suspended. Another, supported by both Conservatives and Bloc Québécois, says the government wouldn't be able to circumvent laws that include the Criminal Code, Ethics and Conflicts of Interest legislation, the Indian Act, or the Official Languages Act. Those are reasonable exclusions there. The committee shot down other proposed amendments, including changes to write the Liberals' professed 2-year deadline for project approvals into the bill, and to reduce the sunset clause of the special fast-tracking process from 5 to 2 years. At Wednesday's long committee meeting, Lance Haymond, chief of the Kebawek First Nation in Quebec, warned the lack of consultation in drafting the legislation could lead to protests like the Idle No More movement against the former Conservative government's bid to rewrite project assessments in 2012. Quote, the conditions for an Idle No More 2 uprising are being written into the law as we speak, Haymond said. McKinnon defended the bill, Stephen McKinnon, who's the House leader, Thursday and shrugged off a question about how some liberals have raised questions about concerns from Indigenous leaders and groups like the Assembly of First Nations. And here's what I'm talking about when Andrew Coyne is talking about high-minded sort of rejections. These questions, when they are being answered, should probably not be shrugged off. That type of attitude doesn't help. Quote, "We believe that by moving ahead on projects, we will continue to give Canadians the confidence that we can get big projects done, can create jobs for skilled trade workers in this country, can attract investment, and can create economic development opportunities for Indigenous peoples," he said. Okay, I understand that you want to create economic opportunities, and we know we have to act fast. But we can't be sloppy, right? We are trying to restore Canada's reputation as a place that we can do business because a lot of people are making the claims that it just takes too long and, who wants to invest here? So I understand that. I understand that we want to provide clear, predictable, transparent rules to know what the process and timelines will be. That's what's needed. This bill is not accomplishing that part. Because if that bill, as written, creates opportunities for protests and things to be in court, then all of a sudden it's not a clear, predictable, and transparent process. So you want to give yourself the permission to move more quickly, let's say than 5 to 7 years to approve something. That's understandable, and there could be ways through streamlining and all that kind of stuff where that can be achieved. But you don't want to go so fast that everything gets tied up in courts and you're creating unpredictability of another kind that's just as damaging to investment, particularly foreign investment. Now, as Althea Raj explains later on in the issue, it's not just the traditional sort of oil companies and who want to be able to fast track projects. People on the pro environment side would like that too, right? Let's get that wind farm approved quickly. Quick, Mother Nature's watch is ticking. We need to do this fast. So there are advantages for everyone in order to be able to have a process that's a little more professionalized, to take a little bit of the CEO kind of stuff in terms of professionalism and expediency and bring it in while still remembering that Canada is not a corporation. Right?
Well, that's
CEO Mark Carney only has to remember the shareholders, but Prime Minister Mark Carney has to remember that absolutely everybody that lives in this country is a shareholder.
I think he gets that. I mean, he did talk about that when he was in Washington and said, I spoke to the owners of Canada and they said it's not for sale.
Mhm.
Whether or not he puts that into practice full time is another story, and that remains to be seen. But I think he gets it.
Mhm. Now, in this next clip here, and like I said, and maybe that is the case, right? And if you look at everything in terms of like his book values and all that kind of stuff, and
Mhm.
we showed, at Pride he stood on the hill, and like this, he's not a hardcore right, clearly,
No.
but he does come from that side, and my main concern is not necessarily malicious intent, but a blind spot potentially, and the CEO mentality is, I say it, you execute. What's the delay?
Mhm.
Because when you only have to serve your shareholders and all your shareholders are on board and all that kind of stuff, that's one thing. But if you thought of Canada as a corporation and absolutely everyone is a shareholder, well, all the people that voted Bloc, all the people that voted NDP, all the people that voted Green, they're not on board with this as it is.
Mhm.
Yes, and you can't just, as you would in a company, say, "Well, we're doing it anyway." Do it anyway in that same way. Yes, you have to take the time and make sure that people are on board and that you have reached out. So a little more talk, consultation, a little more visibility on those soft skills without making statements like, "Well, we need this, so it just makes sense." So, right? need a little more, and that was the point I was making yesterday. It's like Mark Carney definitely has the IQ, and he definitely has the EQ in the boardroom because he's able to handle Trump and all that kind of stuff. He's able to handle Daniel Smith, whatnot. But there's an EQ element as well that is dealing with people, citizens, and stakeholder groups that have different opinions than yours. And that might be a skill that's not necessarily in the boardroom when you're at the international banker level. So there
I
might
don't
be a
know.
little blind spot there.
There is a subset of citizenry in this country, and more so in the United States, who believe that Canada is a corporation and the United States of America is a corporation. Now, under Trump, it's looking more and more like that every day. Under Carney, this new bill, C5, C5? Yeah, C5? C2, I don't know.
C5. This one's C5 here, specifically.
This new bill, that brings us more into the corporate guise, if you will. I don't care for the bill. And he knows that you can't run a country like a corporation. Whether or not he's able to put that into practice is a different story. The jury is still out on that one. This initial bill is not promising. It's not promising.
Now, amendment process, like this, there's some good things in there that happened. I was pointed at, Lindan pointed to me to a National Observer article, so I'll go take a look at that as well. The next clip we have, so this is sort of punditry bringing in some perspective. The next one we have is Cody Blois, who is the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister personally. This is an interview that he gave with Power and Politics yesterday, and in it you will see what I mean about he speaks to it very well. He clearly seems to know the bill. He's able to speak to it eloquently. He's able to speak through it, speak to it with substance. But there doesn't seem to be that much receptivity to the level of concern because he seems to be so confident that that's not going to be a problem, right?
I don't
So,
catch that.
but it's like there's a difference between, yes, this bill has holes in it as written, but don't worry, we'll do it the right way. And there are people coming to them saying, listen, we're not worried about you.
Mm-hmm.
We're worried about the next person. The way this is written creates way too much opportunity. You really need to tighten this up.
There's just a little too loose. Yeah, you won't do anything bad, but who's to say the subsequent government?
Exactly. And I do not get the sense listening to this interview that seems to register legitimately as a concern. It seems that the sense I get is that they are so confident that they are going to do it right. And if you just, watch us do it, I guess you'll see.
Perhaps
But
that's
that's not the issue.
Perhaps that's a youth issue.
Could
Because
be.
Cody Blois is quite young.
But it seems to be a general. Stephen McKinnon's a lot of comments if I was reading and like in the press coming before. It's like, I don't know, but we need this. We need this. The like Donald Trump is the presence there and all that kind of stuff like this. We need to act fast. We just need to we don't have time to deal with those things. We need this. And it's like you need to take time to do those things because if you don't do it, you're just going to upend yourself at a point later on in the process.
I'm getting the trust me bro vibes from Cody Blois.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at the clip. And it's shrinking.
We begin in Ottawa, where the federal government is focused on getting its nation-building bill through the House of Commons. This, despite pushback from some Indigenous leaders and even some Liberal MPs. Cody Blois is a Nova Scotia Liberal MP and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, and he joins me now. Cody Blois, good to see you again. Thanks for being here, sir. David. Well, look, the committee is meeting all night to hear from witnesses and go through the legislation. still people feel this is being rushed. Why is this an adequate amount of time to bring in legislation as significant as C5?
Well, look, the government has a mandate for change, and the Prime Minister was elected some 45 days ago to advance the economic interests of this country. We're in a very perilous time. We're sitting here in a very nice studio in Ottawa. David, it can feel comfortable, but the economy is under duress from what we're seeing from unjustified and illegal tariffs from the United States, particularly on our steel and aluminum industry. We do have a trade deficit that the Prime Minister is going to have to tackle. The things that we have taken on as a government in the first 3 or 4 weeks back to Parliament is all centered on driving the Canadian economy, and C5 is part of that, as is some of the affordability measures that we've introduced, along with the 2% defense target. So this is what we ran on. This is what we were just elected to do, which is build big projects in this country. But what I want to address, and we'll have the opportunity here today, is what this bill is and what it isn't. This bill is about enhancing economic opportunity in this country for all Canadians, including Indigenous Canadians.
Look, and the goal, the stated intention of this legislation as an objective of this government was very clear throughout the election campaign in the days since. But it's the fine print of legislation that people want extra time to look at, right? Like even Nate Erskine-Smith, who is in your caucus, saying that we should take a little bit more time to make sure we get it right. Why are we shutting the debate down and curtailing committee scrutiny? I mean, this is coming from inside the House here.
Nate's one member. He is always entitled to his voice. He's always been very vocal in the House of Commons. But at the same time, there are many proponents and many members of Parliament that are saying we have to be able to advance projects that matter to this national interest. There are Indigenous communities in this country that want to be a part of big projects. This Prime Minister has made very clear. Because, again, this conversation is being framed in a way somehow that it's against the economic interests of this Indigenous communities in this country. The Prime Minister has been very clear. It's going to have to be partnership with Indigenous communities. There is, look, I have the legislation right here. It's 18 pages. It's not a very complicated bill, David, really between two things. One, about removing federal barriers to interprovincial trade. This is something we've talked about at a great length.
That's not controversial at all, that
Second
part.
piece is around really trying to find ways to take the multitude of federal regulations. There is the Department of Fisheries. There is the Department of Transport. There might be the Department of Environment. And streamlining that to one federal decision. It's not about making shortcuts. It's about taking many concurrent processes and driving it into one process. Nothing in this Act takes away from Section 35 rights. Nothing in this Act takes away from the Indigenous participation in major projects. Right. And one of the 5 principles, David, in the legislation is that it has to support Indigenous communities and nations in this country. Right.
And look, I know there is language in there that says they must consult, and there's no wiggle room in that. But, here we are in the middle of June. What nation-building project doesn't go ahead if you take until the end of June to pass this legislation and give parliamentarians an extra week and a little bit more committee time and maybe erase some of the skepticism or reduce some of the doubt that exists even with people who support your government and broadly support the intentions of this legislation?
Well, you just referenced Minister LeBlanc, and I think it was Chris Fox before the committee right now as we're speaking. The work is undertaken by parliamentarians. It's 18 pages long, David. Yeah. So this is not a 300-page bill. It's 18 pages. It creates a framework. Nothing in C5 takes away Indigenous rights, takes away the desire for the government to make sure that we are advancing on issues around climate and environment. It sets forward a framework for a conversation. We have no time to waste. We were just elected for change in this country. I can go back to where I just started this conversation. Go talk to a steel worker in Hamilton right now. Talk about steel workers, people who are being impacted by U.S. tariffs. The Prime Minister was very clear throughout the entire campaign. Canada can give itself more internally than anyone can take away from us. This legislation is about doing just this. It's about creating a framework so the government can get down to having these conversations with Indigenous communities to say, here is a proponent that is maybe interested. Let's talk about if this is something that you want to be involved in from an equity perspective. Let's talk about if this is something you would like to see happen in your territory so that we can get these projects approved and move forward to drive the national economy.
Look, I appreciate the bill is not that long, only 18 pages, but a bill doesn't have to be long to be significant in its consequence, right? And it is moving fast, but not rushing. That is the challenge on doing things like this. And there are well-intentioned people suggesting that maybe you're going a little bit too fast. I mean, the election was only April 28th. It hasn't been 2 months. Parliament has only just been recalled, and now this legislation that rewrites how major projects get approved while promising to guardrail, Section 35 rights and environmental protection. Normally something like this takes a heck of a lot more time to study and consult. And I appreciate the urgency created by what's coming out of Washington, but unintended consequences are still consequences, right? And people aren't asking for this to stop. They're asking for it to slow down, maybe for a week or two, and take into July if necessary.
The Prime Minister has said we'll take as much time as necessary. So the hope and the desire is that every day that passes is one day less that the government is not having a framework that takes the multitude of federal regulatory authorities, particularly on major national projects, and finds a process to be able to sit down with Indigenous communities, to be able to identify as part of the project conditions the elements in which we can make sure we are being mindful of the impact on species, the impact on environment, making sure that Section 35, this is a framework. Nothing in this bill, David, takes away from the existing laws and constitutional requirements in this country, but it sets forward a process for the provinces, for the private sector, and Indigenous communities to get to the table to build the big projects, because we do have to be quicker. We have to be able to find a way to make these projects work without compromising the public policy values that undermine all of the statutes we're talking about.
I know the Prime Minister said take as much time as is necessary, but there's a reason the Transport Committee is going clause by clause till midnight tonight. It's to get it done in a short, compressed time frame, and the plan, as it stands right now, is for Parliament to approve this and then rise by the end of this week, is it not? Like, the goal is to get this done by Friday. That's not as much time as
the goal is to set forward a framework in legislation that allows us to sit down to be able to identify a few projects. We're not talking about thousands. We're not talking about hundreds even, David. We're talking about perhaps maybe a dozen to 20. I don't want to put an exact number, but that is kind of the parameters of what we're talking about here. Major national projects, some of which, by the way, have been in the hopper for quite some time. But we need to be able to make sure that there's a pathway. I'll give you an example. In some projects that are nation building in this country, you may have multiple approvals and authorizations from certain federal agencies, and others where their process has not even started. How do we find a way to streamline that? That is the goal. Sure. It's not about taking away anything from Indigenous communities. You know, I had in my ear on the way in comments made by Premier Ford. Not my job to weigh in, but there is clear elements of provincial legislation where I don't think there was a thoughtful approach on this. Everything that this government is intending to do is to sit down. Minister Hodgson, if he was sitting in this chair, would tell you that he's been meeting with hundreds of Indigenous leaders about how we make sure we move.
Well, look, he sat in this chair a couple of weeks ago, and we did talk about this, but it was kind of before we got to the nitty-gritty analysis of the legislation. But quickly, before I let you go, I do want to play that clip of Doug Ford, because the Premier of Ontario is out today, and he is also pushing the fast-track projects. You have Bill C5, he had Bill 5, he has passed it. I know it's not something you are accountable for, but it is all part of the ongoing national conversation. This is what Doug Ford had to say earlier today.
But this is like handing an opportunity on a silver platter to First Nations. There's going to be a point that you can't just keep coming hat in hand all the time to the government. You got to be able to take care of yourselves. And when you literally have gold mines, nickel mines, every type of critical mineral that the world wants, and you're saying, no, I don't want to touch that. By the way, give me money. Not going to happen.
You know, cap in hand, I know this is not the position of the federal government of Canada, but is that a helpful thing to hear from the Premier of Ontario at this moment in time?
I want to be very clear on behalf of the Prime Minister, because you're right, David, I can only speak for our Prime Minister, our government. Our intention is very clear. We want Indigenous communities to be partners as a part of moving forward projects that are of major significant national economic interest that can help support Indigenous communities across the country, that help support the country, while also making sure that we reconcile this with Canada's clear commitment on climate and environment. Those things can be accomplished, but we do have to find a way to streamline. That's exactly what this bill is about, but it's not about taking shortcuts in terms of partnering, and that's the word I want, because I represent 3 Indigenous communities in Kings Hants, David. Sebaganegedy, Annapolis Valley First Nation, and Glooscap. If not for the government, let me speak to my own constituents that this bill is about enabling legislation to help support the advancement of projects that matter across this country.
Okay. Cody Blois, Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. We appreciate you coming in. Thanks for your time today, sir.
Thank you, Dave.
Impressions, Mr. Grizzly?
I don't come away feeling good about that.
So that's the same thing, right? So he speaks eloquently to it because he can give substance, but we have a mandate. Okay, yes, you were given a mandate, but you were given a mandate to do it any which way, right?
It came off as a little bit of cocky and arrogant to me.
And some dismissiveness, right? It's like Nate had some objections. This is coming from your own party. Well, Nate has always been vocal. brushed aside.
Yeah.
We have no time to waste. We were elected to do this. Yes, you were elected to put the economy like this, but again, not any which way. We'll take as much time as necessary, he states. But then when David Cochrane makes the point, says, well, I mean, there's been closure, and you're like, committees just going till midnight to study this because, you know, you guys want it done fast. I mean, by Friday is not all the time it can take, right? I mean, like, come on, I guess. And then just rejects it off the back hand. The goal is to, it's like, and the goal has nothing to do with the amount of time that and all these House procedural moves that have been used to do that. It keeps on pointing that it's only 18 pages. Now that it's only 18 pages, yes, means that there's not a lot of clauses if you're going through clause by clause, and therefore you don't necessarily maybe you don't need tons of time like this because of the number of clauses and the number of amendments. But on the other hand, as Mr. Cochrane definitely pointed out very astutely, the fact that it only has 18 pages doesn't mean that the changes in each one of those clauses cannot have incredible significance. You can have a one-page bill that can change a lot, like a hell of a lot, right? So the fact that there are fewer clauses means, okay, you would think automatically, well, fewer clauses, well, then they don't need much time. Yeah, but what if this clause contains something that is so big that it might be a really good idea to interview like 2 or 3 witnesses and whatnot on that specific thing? Right? So it's not the number of pages and the number of clauses that necessarily that determine that it needs more or less work. It's he's talking in quantitatively, while David Cochrane is talking qualitatively. And Cody Blois does not seem to be accepting the qualitative argument here in this interview. And again, near the end, everything this government wanted to do is intended. Our intent is, well, we know what we say about good intentions,
Never enough.
right? So it stands like this, and there is a need to move faster, right? Move fast, break some things, but can we at least take the time to scan the room first to look at and make sure that the things that we are going to break are the things that we do need to break? And when we swing our bat, swing in such a way that we break the thing and maybe not take 2 or 3 things out with it.
Well, I've never been a big fan of that move fast and break things. It's like move fast, things will get broken should be a better approach. I mean, move fast and break things. Well, it sounds like you're just trying to go through willy-nilly and anything that's in my way, I'm going to destroy. It's like, no, we're going to move fast and some things will get broken. I think that's a just more cautionary approach to it. It's like, but
Well, and again, as Athea Raj puts in the first statement, yes, okay, there are some projects that have been studied and are ready to go. Yes, but they're probably studied and are ready to go because they've been improved through the processes that we've had already. And they're looking, or maybe there's 1 or 2 things left, or there was some additional financing or whatnot. So there are some projects that are ready to go. They're probably not big ones like pipelines and all that kind of stuff. It could be a port renovation, could be that type of stuff. But for the bigger things, however, it's just there really is no reason for which, and if they are asked this, and there's whenever they are asked this, and everything that I've read, it's always a dismissal to something else, or like what's the big deal that you can't take an extra 2 weeks to make sure you get this right? Well, we were elected to do this, and we got to move fast because there's a Trump threat. That's not a good reason to want to skip that, and there's certainly nothing so pressing that 1 or 2 extra weeks could not be dedicated, right? So it's almost like we were elected and we got a mandate, and there's urgency because there's a threat, so we got to move now, and that's the extent of the thinking. And while all of that is true, there's more. there's more. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen more acknowledgement and receptivity to the concerns that were brought in these answers. So, to be convinced about that intent. I didn't get that from this interview. Now, again, this government hasn't been in power long enough. We don't know, right? And we have no reason to assume either that they're of bad faith or anything. But when a bill like this passes quickly, once the legislation is, you don't want to pass the legislation and then find out that you misassessed the government. If you have, right? You want to take the extra time to be sure. Because you will only know if you've misassessed the government when something bad happens. But that legislation's already there. So there's a bit of cart before the horse type thing. There's a bit of chicken and egg. Well, you can trust us, but you haven't been there long enough to know that we can trust you. It says, but trust us, we'll be, everything will be fine. But shouldn't you put something in there that lets us know that for sure we can trust you before we trust you? Right? It's a dance, and something has to come first and something has to come second. I understand that. And there's order of priorities in which you do things. But as urgent as things are, and we do have to move quickly, right? We don't have time to luxuriate in navel gazing. But we do have time to take one or two checks in the mirror to see if our hair is right and, the collar's not half the collar's up or something, right? It just seems that there's not that much willingness to do that part. I could be wrong. It's just a sense I'm getting here. I'm not the only one who has that sense. But like I said, it could ultimately be all right. And like I said, there are more amendments and they're going to be voted for. And it has to go through the Senate and there might be more amendments there and all that kind of stuff. So the end product we might have still could be good. But this way of going about it is making a few people nervous, and probably unnecessarily so, if a little bit more time had been put in at the front end on consultation and ensuring that people's concerns were actually. See, the thing is, you have to do more than say we're taking your concerns in consideration. You have to show people that you are, and you have to be seen as doing it. And that's the phase that is missing here. And it's like, we've given you a mandate. Yes, we trust you. Yes. But show us the work. Let us see you doing that work of the proper consultation and taking concerns, legitimate concerns, and giving it the due consideration that they deserve. Now, Dale Smith, who's a journalist that I like very much and I highly recommend, wrote a little bit on it. And you heard Andrew Coyne refer to Henry VIII Clause here. So he's got a piece called Roundup Quietly Objecting to the Henry VIII Clause. The Liberals' One Canada Economy Bill continues to be railroaded through Parliament without proper scrutiny and with the worst possible excuses from ministers and parliamentary secretaries possible. Now, this was written yesterday, but this is the point I'm getting at when he's talking about the worst excuses. Quote, "We won the election promising this," or "this is in response to a crisis." Get lost with that nonsense. While there are Liberals who are quietly objecting to the process, particularly the speed through which the second half of the bill, i.e. the giant Henry VIII Clause, are going through without actual Indigenous consultation on the legislation itself, they are absolutely correct in saying that this is going to damage the trust that they have spent a decade carefully building. Here's the thing. While ministers are going to committees and the Senate swearing up and down that these projects of national importance are going to respect environmental regulations and Indigenous consultation, the very text of the bill betrays that notion. Now, that's prior to amendments being proposed when this was written. The open-ended list of legislation affected by the Henry VIII clause shows that they can bypass environmental laws or even the Indian Act through regulation, though regulation shows clearly they don't have to respect their. Sorry, let's try that sentence again because I keep tripping over myself. The open-ended list of legislation affected by the Henry VIII clause shows that they can bypass environmental laws or even the Indian Act through though regulation shows that clearly they don't have to respect either environmental laws or that the consultation doesn't need to be meaningful or engage in free, prior, and informed consent. Now, as Kit Linda mentioned, there was an amendment that was passed that says that you can't. There's certain laws that you can't bypass now, but at the time of writing, that was the case. If they did want to respect those things, they wouldn't need a giant Henry VIII clause to bypass them. And frankly, the fact that the Conservatives are supporting this bill should be yet another red flag, because the Conservatives very much want to use this Henry VIII clause if they form government next before this law sunsets, and they can blame the Liberals for implementing it. It's so stupid, and they refuse to see what's right in front of them. And let's not forget that you still have Danielle Smith and Scott Moe demanding that environmental legislation be repealed as the planet is about to blow through its carbon budget to keep global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And when it comes to Indigenous consultation, Doug Ford rammed through a bill to make these development projects law-free zones, while falsely claiming that First Nations are coming, quote, cap in hand, while refusing to develop resources in a clearly racist rant, ignoring that their objections are often to do with the fact that they have repeatedly been screwed over by proponents and wind up being worse off, which is why they want revenue sharing agreements that companies don't want to provide. When this is the, quote, partnership with provinces that Carney touts, it's really, really not building a whole lot of trust. Meanwhile, 300 civil society groups are calling on the government to scrap the border bill because it has so many potential rights violations within it. The department offered some clarifications on the immigration and refugee portions, but that's not sufficient for those groups. Citizen Lab also did an analysis of the lawful access provisions within the bill as they interface with American data sharing laws, and they can be pretty alarming for the kinds of information that the Americans can demand that the border bill would provide them with. Now, the border bill is not C5; it's I think so. No, the border bill C2. So, but it's just this general vibe, right? That people are saying, "Whoa, this is a little much and a little fast." So said it's not necessarily questioning the intent, and that's a rhetorical device that people use when you're saying, "But there's a problem here." Yes, but my intent is good. Yeah, I know you want me to keep on focusing on your intent, and you're going to soothe me by saying your intent is good. I'm focused on process, right? People, process queens in an organization annoy the fuck out of people. They're there for a reason. Our good process matters. When you have good process, you are guaranteed to have that predictable, stable, transparent environment that you are seeking to generate and attract those business dollars. So process matters. It's boring, it's not sexy, but it matters. Chantal Hébert is of the opinion from that at issue thing that you can undermine your goals by going too quickly. And she's saying, like, at some point, there will be a price to pay. It won't be tomorrow because we're still in the honeymoon phase, but there will be a price to pay at some point if this type of approach persists and seems to permeate all things. Do you have any extra thoughts on this, Mr. Grizzly?
No, not really. Just the whole thing is just disappointing to me that when you have the Liberal government trying to put this bill through and the Conservatives are cheering them on, I'm like, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
That should make you panic.
Yeah. Now, the last little clip I have on this is from Mia Rabson, who I'm relatively new to power and politics over the past few months, but I really like her general. She's relatively consistent and bring some thoughtful commentary. And here she's mentioning, talking a little bit about a lesson that the current government might be learning by proceeding this way, and with the pushback that they are getting.
Just trying to cue it here because the cue point doesn't seem to align with
Oh, so interesting.
what she's not there. Spice the knife is
She's not there?
out of the cue point you gave me.
Oh, my word.
Just kidding.
Okay, I don't understand how that happens. That we
There, now I have her. It's just about a minute later.
Okay, sorry. Must have been I must have looked too quickly then.
Yeah, so just give me a sec here while I pull the cue point up and we can show this clip. Every time I do that, it shrinks the image. I don't know why. Some weird thing with Max.
I think to some extent this is a little bit of the Prime Minister learning how to be a politician. I mean, he's been a businessman, he's been a banker, he knows those worlds really well, but he hasn't done politics before. And so he's trying to move very quickly. And sometimes a little bit of consultation and discussion could go a long way. If this bill and the specifics of this bill, if he'd sat down with Indigenous leaders before this bill was tabled, government to government, that might have gone a long way to making them understand what the bill was actually trying to do and where they're going with it. And he's now trying to defend it, but when you're defending it from a position where people are already upset with you, you're already losing. And so I think it's a little bit of a lesson that sometimes taking a little bit of extra time might soften the blow to some extent, but he doesn't seem to be backing down at all. The Liberals, the Conservatives and the Liberals are joining on this. There's, they don't have a majority, the Liberals, but they're having no problem getting things through the House right now.
Well, with the Conservatives, it's a super majority, with the two of them joining together on everything.
Well, and the cooperation it's sort of funny. I mean, Shannon Stubbs, the MP for Alberta, made a joke in the committee last night that the Liberals voted for an amendment. She's like, that hasn't happened in 10 years. So it's, the cooperation between those two parties is actually happening, and that's kind of what Canadians wanted. I don't see him backing down, but it could be a really long summer for him. There's going to be protests.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it.
I mean, JD, we saw, Rebecca Alty, the new Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, giving the very stark assurances that nothing happens without a recognition of your Section 35 rights and treaties and all of these things, and that language does exist in the legislation. Yeah. But the speed with which this is moving has just raised a lot of doubts, and there is some legitimate historic reasons for skepticism. So there's some reassurance that's got to happen here.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's sort of like the overall. So if we're giving the full benefit of the doubt, what Mia Rabson is saying here, like this, he's got the corporate, he's got the board experience, he's got this, but there are certain things about being a politician when it comes to taking concerns from the shareholders that are different than in the boardroom. And that might be where the learning curve is for this particular prime minister. So again, not necessarily ill-intended, and we're not even saying that too, because there's not enough information out there for us to say that. Some people are going like, I already don't like him already, or I'm already regretting the vote, or I'm already, because listen, people can have this impression, but I'm not sure that there are enough data points
I
yet
don't think so.
out there for us to be able to decide. But there are enough data points for us to have our ears prick up and go, huh?
It's
Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I don't what you just said is important. There's not enough data points to really say, oh, this government sucks and look what they're doing to us. I'm like, they haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
They haven't been no, I shouldn't, that's not true. Carney's actually accomplished a lot in a very short time period.
Yes.
This is the first thing I've seen that seems to be detrimental to the vast majority of Canadians. As she just said, there will be protests over this during the summer. There will be, when people figure out what this bill holds in it. Now, amendments tabled at committee will change things. Will this bill go through the way they wrote it? I don't think so. I think there'll be multiple changes to it before they even get it to be tabled. It's just a bill right now.
Yeah.
It's not law. It won't be anytime soon. It would have to go through the Senate, and the Senate, I'm sure, would. There's the point of the Senate is sober second thought, right?
Yeah.
They'd look at this and go, "Hold on a second here. This, you know."
Well, that's the thing. And if the Senate makes a couple of amendments, it has to go back to the House.
Right.
Right. So in that intervening time, there could be time. So, uh, a lot of people kvetch about the Senate, but the Senate here could do
Mhm.
the part of ensuring that that extra week or 2 or month actually does occur.
Well, and the point of the Senate is, like I said, sober second thought when it comes to stuff like this. And when Harper wanted to abolish the Senate and people said no, and then he started to get a bit of a groundswell of support for people wanting to abolish the Senate. And I was like, okay, let's look at this a little bit closer, because if he wants to get rid of it, then we definitely need it. And that was the thing that switched my mind frame and mindset about the Senate. When he wanted to get rid of it, I'm like, whoa, hang on a second here. What does that do if he gets rid of the Senate? What happens to us? Now, how much power does he have? Now he can ram through anything he wants. Like he said, you won't recognize Canada when I'm done with it. And like that great novelist and writer Farley Mowat said, he is the most dangerous man to have ever held that office in the history of this nation.
Mhm.
So the Senate is important.
Yeah. It's like
Very important.
the thing that you just put up on the bottom there from Kit Christian saying like there's enough for the what the fuck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why I put
Absolutely.
it up, because you're there is.
Absolutely. So I like to say that it takes about a full, like in relationships.
Mhm.
So it could be similar to government. It takes about a year
Yeah.
to see whoever you're dating's all of their colors.
Yeah,
Then it takes a
this is
second
the
year.
first. I won't say this. Well, yeah, no, this is a red flag. This is a red flag moment, I think.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah. It's one of those things that you got to, oh, okay. I'm going to
just
put this here.
put a pin in that one.
Yeah.
Pay
See,
attention to that for
exactly.
future.
And it takes the second year to see which of those things are blips and which of things are inherent to the
Right.
personality.
And again, I'm glad people are alarmed by this. I'm glad people are taking note of this. This is good, because people are paying attention. We need more people to pay attention. But it's if Pierre Poilievre, who doesn't have a job and is squatting in subsidized housing, complains about the price of groceries while he has a private chef, if he is in agreement with this and his party is in agreement with this, that should make you question a few things, because the Conservative Party of Canada is not the progressive Conservative Party of Brian Mulroney or Joe Clark or John Diefenbaker. It is not that party. That party ceased to exist 22 years ago. This is a right-wing, evangelical-based party. As many people call them, Christo-fascists. Call them that. Feel free to. You're allowed to. It's Canada. You can express your free thought freely. But they are not progressives. They're not really even conservatives. They're conservative in name.
Yeah.
These are not good people.
Yeah.
They're not doing things with your best intent. If a bill like this, which people are ringing alarm bells about, and the Conservatives are going, oh, hell yeah, I'm like, you might want to take a closer look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You really do. Okay. So when we're talking about Indigenous groups specifically, Anishinaabe Aski Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler, which is a name that we've mentioned on the show before, did speak out against the One Canadian Economy Act on Parliament Hill on Tuesday. And this is what he had to say about it.
I just want to start off by saying that how profoundly disappointed we are in this new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and his government. That after so many years of his predecessor's effort to try to make that relationship work between this government and First Nations, that it's gone so many steps backwards, and that trust and that respect that we had worked so hard to build is pretty much gone. And so I would just remind him that he needs to live up to his obligations, the treaty obligations and the constitutional obligation that he has to work with us. I also want to say that we are not against prosperity. We want our people, we want our communities to be prosperous. That so many of our communities desperately need right now resources to address addictions and mental health and suicides. We are not against our communities having access to clean, safe drinking water. We are not against our communities having access to quality housing. We are not against our people getting jobs, with the reality right now that 80% of our communities are unemployed. We want all these things, but not at the expense of our rights and not at the expense of our children's future. That is why we're here, to remind this government that the resources, the rich resources, the waters, the minerals, the trees that are in our lands and our territories are ours. It's not Ontario or Canada to try to dictate to ourselves or to industry how these resources should be utilized. That's our responsibility. And so even if this bill passes, even if it does become law, that it will not apply in our territories. I said earlier today that we have our own laws. We have our own sacred responsibilities to protect our lands, our resources, to ensure that our children have a future. And we are determined to continue to uphold those responsibilities that we have. That's why we're here.
So, pretty clear statement here by Chief Fiddler, and making the point that the decade that we've just spent working on reconciliation here, the trust that's been built there through that could be put at risk.
Yeah, it could be undermined. It could be put at risk. It could
Undermined, that's the word I was looking for.
It could be undermined. I very much see that. And I agree with what he's saying. It's like your predecessor had put a lot of work into this, and now it seems like you're just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's the gist of what he said. Like, I agree with what he said. It's, we're living on stolen land.
I got something about that later on the show too.
Well, I won't be here for it because I got to go.
All right.
I got to take off. So thanks for joining us, folks. I'm working on a couple of music projects right now that hopefully I'll get them posted later today if time permits, and shooting some video and recording some things to add to the plethora of things that I do. I got to go. I got to get my Ms. Lola out because she's eager to go for a WALK. And I'm going to take her around the neighborhood so she can do her patrol and her inspection, make sure everything is up to snuff for her. And I will I'll see you all later.
All right. See you, my friend. Now, this is from Monday, so it's a little out of date, but critics warned, this is from from the Canadian Press, Kyle Duggan, courtesy of him. But yes, with regard to people in the House because we do have some Indigenous members of the House of Commons. Critics warned that the proposed law would allow Ottawa to flout its constitutional duty to consult with First Nations under Section 35 of the Constitution. NDP MP Leah Gazan warned Monday that these fast-track projects will only wind up in the courts over the government's failure to properly consult with Indigenous peoples. Quote, "The federal government is absolutely bulldozing over democratic principles in favor of corporate interests, and it's going to have bad consequences. This is abhorrent. This is unprecedented. We need to ensure governments have proper oversights, not provide ministers and cabinet with unlimited powers to make decisions in violations of constitutional obligations." Constitutional experts told the Canadian press that the legislation's most far-reaching provisions are likely to survive a court challenge. Paul Daly, chair in administrative law and governance at the University of Ottawa, said while the provisions giving the executive more power are controversial, they're likely constitutional. Sections 21 to 23 of the bill allow the executive branch to bypass existing rules and processes in 13 laws, including the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, the Indian Act, and the Impact Assessment Law, through a regulatory process that does not need to be approved by Parliament. These are the sections as what's known in the legal community as the Henry VIII clauses, a reference to a king who preferred to govern by decree rather than through Parliament. Courts have not found these to be constitutionally invalid, Daly said, adding there are guardrails in the bill and charter rights will continue to apply to the legislation. It's similar in character to the carbon tax legislation from a few years ago where the Supreme Court said the Henry VIII clause was constitutionally valid, and I suspect that a court, if the statute were challenged, would come to the same conclusion. Anna Johnston, the staff lawyer at West Coast Environmental Law, said sections 22 and 23 are very worrisome because they could allow the federal cabinet to exempt a pipeline or some other project from the Species at Risk Act. She said the bill overall gives the federal government too much leeway on the Crown's duty to consult with Indigenous peoples on decisions that affect them. Quote, "If I were Canada's lawyers, I would have advised them strenuously against this bill. That consultation has to be meaningful, and I worry that, especially under the timelines that this government wants to make these decisions, that this bill is basically circumventing the government's constitutionally required duty to consult." Liberal MP Jamie Battiste, also Indigenous, insisted that the legislation should not be so controversial and blamed the public outcry on bad communication and a lack of understanding of the bill's contents. Quote, "This legislation not only takes the step of saying that the duty to consult on these future projects is there, but there actually has to be meaningful equity and participation. That has the opportunity for some lucky First Nations to have billions of dollars worth of equity as part of these major projects, and I'd love to see that and some clean energy in the Atlantic." So that's that portion of it here. Elizabeth May herself stated that Prime Minister Carney's decision to ram the major projects bill through the House represents a new low in contempt for Parliament. She told a press conference that she hasn't seen anything like it since the Conservative government under Stephen Harper pushed a major omnibus bill more than a decade ago. She said she was shocked by Harper's decision to bring in and fast track let's try that again. She said she was shocked by Harper's decision to bring in and fast-track C-38 in 2012, a bill that was 400 pages long and destroyed 70 environmental laws. "This is worse," she added. "It appears to me, and it remains to be seen, that Mr. Carney's new majority coalition is liberal-conservative, delivering Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's policies with a more friendly face." That might be a little bit of hyperbole here. May spoke outside the House of Commons foyer Monday morning alongside First Nations leaders, NDP MP Gord Johns, and lawyers from environmental groups, all of whom raised concerns about the legislation and the pace at which it's sprinting through the Commons. Grand Chief Linda DeBasig of the Anishinaabe Nation said First Nations have, quote, "not been consulted on this bill appropriately or adequately." Quote, "This bill presents serious concerns that, in our view, creates a path forward for any government to create legislation that undermines the rights and interests of our First Nations peoples," she said. And then, soon after the bill was presented, the Liberals had passed a closure motion with the support of the Conservatives for speed through the study and debate bill by week's end. And this here is the type of commentary we're getting at the beginning of the week, and we've noticed that it's switched. But Government House Leader Stephen McKinnon defended the government's haste on Monday, arguing that it has public buy-in since the bill delivers on major Liberal campaign promises from the recent election. Quote, "We just had the ultimate democratic test, and you know what we heard? Get this country moving. We need a response to the threats coming from down south." And that was the extent of the justification. It has to be more than that, right? So that's where people were getting the sense, the very high-handed dismissal. It's like, we were elected to get this country moving. That's what we're doing. Yes, but again, not any which way. Senator Paul Prosper said he will try to slow down the part of the bill dealing with major projects in the Senate with an amendment. If the Senate amends the bill, it would have to go back to the House of Commons for another approval. So there's at least one senator who's thinking of proposing an amendment that could slow down the process a little bit. The article here doesn't say at that time how much support that he has in order to accomplish this. But the Senate here could, in fact, do its duty and ensure that the thought and consideration that didn't happen through the House process does happen through the Senate process. Now, Kits and Cubs also on the indigenous issue, as you saw, Kits and Cubs. There was that clip early on of Ford making some comments that are particularly disparaging. We have a little bit more of a fuller clip of him with regard to those comments. So taken from CTV. So we will play that here, and we'll then get back to you, cut back to what we were intending to say with regard to this and into it a little more deeply. So here we go. Let's put Mr. Ford on our screens here. Let's remove the mute, and let's see what he had to say.
To some blunt talk now from Premier Doug Ford as he gets ready to meet with chiefs representing 39 First Nations in Ontario today.
This is like handing an opportunity on a silver platter to First Nations that by the way, I have treated like gold. But there's going to be a point that you can't just keep coming hat in hand all the time to the government. You got to be able to take care of yourselves. And when you literally have gold mines, nickel mines, every type of critical mineral that the world wants, and you're saying, no, I don't want to touch that. By the way, give me money. Not going to happen.
First Nations are livid with the province over the passage of Bill 5, which is designed to speed up the construction of large infrastructure projects, particularly mines. New Democrat MPP Sol Mamakwa is calling Ford's comments deeply offensive and racist.
To some blunt talk now from...
So it's not the first time that Doug Ford has an outburst like that. Right? Lazy people at one point. Not too long ago, I believe during the election campaign, or maybe a little bit before that. So yeah, not those comments are not it in any way, shape, or form, and they did not go over well. And when he's talking about, I treat them. Whoops, sorry. That's not supposed to start again. When he says, I treat them like gold. Some people have to wonder about that, what Doug Ford's version of treating people like gold actually is, because there's not that much evidence of that, really, in Doug Ford's past. Doug Ford, let's put it this way. There is nothing about Doug Ford's so far 7 years, I think it is, or so, as premier and any time as mayor that gives me the impression that he is the type of person that goes out of his way to treat the Indigenous community like gold. Now, on that, as proof of his goodwill, Doug Ford pointed to the province's $3 billion Indigenous financing program for loan guarantees to allow First Nations to become owners in big infrastructure projects, as well as $70 million to train Indigenous workers for jobs in construction, development, and mining. And, quote, the part that comes before, he said, to take care of themselves. He said, "When I first came into office, I told Minister Greg Rickford, treat them well, give them what they need, whatever they want for them to prosper." If he says that, again, there's no way we can know that's true, but that's what he's claiming. Saul Mamakwa, the New Democrat who represents the Ring of Fire region and the lone First Nation member of the Ontario legislature, called out Ford's remarks. Quote, "The Premier's remarks today were deeply offensive and racist," he said in a statement. "Today's remarks prove that the Premier has a fundamental lack of understanding of Ontario's treaty relationship with First Nations." Mamakwa urged Ford to repeal the bill, which was only passed into law 2 weeks ago. Quote, "He is trying to create divisions in our province, and this is taking us back. This Premier has made it clear that he won't bring people together, uphold the honor of the Crown, and obtain free, prior, and informed consent." Now, Doug Ford, as that article alluded, had a meeting scheduled with members of the First Nations community. And those are the things that he said going into that meeting to sort of set the tone. Probably not a good idea. And the backlash that he got was pretty intense and rapid. And Doug Ford got to where he felt he needed to, well, not what he felt he needed. Ford definitely messed up, and I think he was informed in no uncertain terms that he had messed up. And Doug Ford has a certain survival instinct. We've mentioned it often on the show, because unlike several premiers like Daniel Smith or something like that, Doug Ford frequently comes back and says, "You know what, I messed up, or I screwed up," right? And reverses himself or makes an apology of some kind. How sincere those apologies are, how sincere the commitments to do better are debatable. But I want you to take a look at this, because whatever was told to him definitely must have affected him, because this is what about, there is some expressions in body language from Doug Ford in the following clips I'm going to show that I've not necessarily seen before when he is backtracking. So again, I'm not a big fan of thinking that Doug Ford is sincere, and maybe he's not sincere here. However, he bopped on the nose with something heavier than a rolled up newspaper. And whether he's sincere or not, he felt it. Let's just put it that way. So again, look at his body language when he walks in. He tries to do the folksy thing once or twice in the comments. Doesn't really work in this case, because the stakes are just that high. But yeah, a humbled, maybe, Doug Ford.
Boy, we got a full house here.
Yeah, I wonder why. Given the preview.
Well, first of all, I want to say I feel we had a very productive meeting. And Grand Chief, thank you so much for coming. And what I said when I went in there, and I'm sincere about this, when I go out, and yesterday, I get pretty passionate. And I just want to say I sincerely apologize for my words, not only if it hurt all the chiefs in that room, but all First Nations. Because we know that if we work together, and I said during the campaign, nothing moves without First Nations consultation, respecting duty to consult, and make sure that we work together. And I get passionate because I want prosperity for their communities. I want prosperity for their children and their grandchildren. And I also mentioned when I was in the meeting about when we work together, ourselves, be it the province, First Nations communities, and the federal government, we're unstoppable. And there's one person we need to stop, and it's Donald Trump. And I also always say the foundation of, be it healthcare, be it economic development, transportation, policing, within First Nations communities, starts with the economy. And there's no one that wants more to make sure everyone prospers than I do. And again, Grand Chief, I want to repeat it again. I sincerely apologize if I've offended anyone. I thought we had a phenomenal meeting, and there's a lot of work to do. We're going to continue to meet. I've been invited up to a lot of First Nations communities because Minister Rickford always promises me he's going to bring me fishing, but he never does. But a lot of chiefs have said, come by, and I've also always said, anytime I go to First Nations communities, they treat me like gold. And that I'll be forever grateful. But we're going to work together. We're going to get through this. And we're going to have a great collaboration. And as I said before, I'll always respect treaty rights, and I'll always respect duty to consult. Because without First Nations, we can't get the critical minerals out of the ground. We can't have the energy that we need, that the whole world wants. So again, Megwich, appreciate everything. Megwich, thank you.
Do you accept?
Okay. First of all, Doug Ford just spoke more in an Indigenous language than he's probably spoken French in the entire 7 years he's been premier by saying Miigwech twice. Doug Ford usually, when he's doing these types of things, he usually has some smiling type eyes type thing. If you're looking at his face, there's no joke in that. There's no Aji shucks folks in his eyes. He's still got the rhetoric in terms like nobody wants to see them prosper more than me. I'm sure there are several people that would like to see them prosper more than you do. Because if that were the case, you would have a track record over the time that you've had a mandate to be able to point to with regard to that. But clearly, the man is humbled here. So whether he's sincere, that's another thing. And he did this thing that people do when they apologize that really annoys me. I apologize if I offended. No, there's no if. Right? You came to this press conference after apologizing to them privately in the room, I'm sure, and then made a point to also apologize publicly, which you should do because you made the comments publicly. You know you offended. So don't apologize if you offended someone. Apologize for having offended people or for having said something offensive, whether people chose to be offended by it or not. There should be no if in an apology. If you were offended, I apologize. But if you weren't, then what? Then it's all good? No, the comments are still bad. You apologize for being offensive. You don't apologize if people are offended. And clearly, he's aware that he was offensive. All right, let's continue on, kids and cubs. Just making sure that the screen is there. Good.
Accept the Premier's apology, or I mean, and how did the meeting go from your point
Well, my name is Grand Council Chief Linda Dubosky, and I understand the media is here to, potentially highlight some of the discussion points, but also to continue to breathe life into perhaps what people call racist comments that were expressed yesterday. As First Nations people, we continue to uphold our treaty agreement with the Crown. Our nations today have met with the Premier at his invitation, at our request to meet. And so I can confirm that before the meeting started that the Premier has indeed and did indeed apologize to our First Nations rights holders sitting at that table today. While there are many other rights holders in this province, our chiefs felt today that the apology was sincere. We are looking at today as a new day going forward. And there are many things that, while we had many of our First Nations leadership here, our rights holders, we do have to take the conversation back to the remainder of our chiefs who are unable to be here due to crises and emergencies in their communities. And we will, reserve our comments until after that, but we can confirm that the Premier has agreed to continue the dialogue with our rights holders to move forward in a good way. He has fulfilled his responsibility in his apology to our chiefs that were sitting here in the presence of the Premier today. And I know the Premier knows that there is more to do in this regard, and I believe his words.
And on Bill 5, is there any change in your view? I know you had expressed deep concern about the legislation and the special economic zones. Is there anything new to say about that?
Our nations, our First Nations within the Anishinaabe Nation remain opposed to Bill 5. The opposition remains in that of which the speed of Bill 5 was entertained, and this has been communicated to the Premier and to various ministers. The First Nations have, spoken with the Premier, have proposed ideas and solutions, and the Premier has made certain commitments that we're not going to speak to today. We do have to respect our nations who weren't in the room today to have those further discussions and to keep the discussions with the Premier within that realm. We are not here to perpetuate a circus, to perpetuate misinformation. We remain steadfast in the rights of our nations. We remain steadfast in supporting those rights and how our First Nations are going to work with the Crown. And I can commit that I can share that the Premier has committed to continue in having that ongoing dialogue with our rights holders in a respectful way.
So there you have Kits and Cubs, Grand Chief Dubosky, we mentioned earlier in one of those articles, offering Doug Ford a lot of grace here. And if you were looking at Doug Ford during that, he seemed to be looking like straight ahead and not trying to do too much. His eyes, I noticed, were watering a little bit in this here. Normally, Doug Ford is sort of, looking around and whatnot, but he was just like straight ahead, and just like, I mean, she wrapped it in kindness, but she said some pretty hard-hitting things there, standing right next to the Premier, right? And not going so far as saying, I believe that these are racist comments, but, comments that, a lot of people think are racist. Yeah, it's very rare that Doug Ford stands right next to someone and sort of eats a huge slice of humble pie. And that happened in this case here. And it's a pretty rare occurrence. Now, let's go back because, you know, as soon as she says this, Doug Ford comes in to talk about, you know, to continue here.
Are you
open to some of those discussions and those proposed ideas?
Well, I'm always open for engagement, and we're going to continue on with engagement because, as I said it during the election, I've said it over and over again, nothing can move without consultation with the First Nations communities, because I want the First Nations communities to prosper, and I want to make sure that their young people get the $10 million. Oh boy, I just blanked out. The $10 million education scholarship, and the $70 million of training. But more importantly, I want to make sure they're part of the $3 billion of equity that we're offering to First Nations. And I feel if they have equity partnership, then they have ownership. And when you have ownership of something, you're going to make sure you take care of it. You're going to make sure whatever that ownership is, you're going to prosper. And I look forward to continuing to communicate. I also look forward to going up to their communities and paying them a visit, talking to their communities, looking at their needs, no matter if it's long-term care or be it sewers or water sanitation, so on and so forth. I want to be there to help them. That's my goal. At the end of the day, that is my goal, to make sure First Nations communities prosper, because when they prosper, Ontario prospers, and when Ontario prospers, Canada prospers. And time is always of the essence when you're being attacked economically by President Trump. And I mentioned to the whole table, you play a critical role, as you have in hundreds of years, in fighting against someone that's trying to take over our livelihoods, trying to disrupt not only our country, but Ontario.
Premier, are you all making changes to Bill 5?
Well, we're going to continue to engage with First Nations communities. They've mentioned that after consultation with other First Nations communities, Grand Chief, then we'll sit down and we'll discuss it. How we can move forward respectfully, but time is of the essence too. And there's a once in a lifetime opportunity, once in a generational opportunity to move forward and make sure that everyone prospers.
I'm going to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you, Premier. To note before media misinterprets the Premier's comments, this meeting specifically today was not consultation of Bill 5 with our member nations.
I agree with that.
It was a meeting that our First Nations requested, our First Nations leadership requested. The Premier offered a date to our First Nations leadership, and they accepted. And today was an initial meeting. We have our discussions and deliberations that our First Nations need to do, respecting their roles as rights holders, and sharing about our conversation today with the Premier. So we're not in a position to speak to the details of those discussions until, we speak to our member First Nations who are unable to be here today. Thank you.
So there, Doug Ford, okay, the chief coming in. I like this chief coming in. It's like, I'm going to make a clarification here, Premier. It's like, and make it very clear. This particular meeting, that was a meeting that was scheduled, and it was a meeting that was at their request. But it's not consultation for Bill 5 at all. And Doug Ford goes, yep, I agree with that right away. Says, yes, this is not part of the consultation on this, the meaningful consultation. Again, I have never seen Doug Ford do that. But this chief here is protecting, in her responses, not only the process, respecting the process between them, but also protecting, right, their truth in that, if they listen to Premier Ford's words and say, okay, I guess this is what this means. It's like, no, I want you to come here before you take those words and reinterpret them. Because this is what those words mean to us, with the unsaid part being, so if you're going to report on what those words meant to us and not how you interpret them, what they mean for you. She is on top of it here. All right. So she offers the clarification. There's some questions coming in. The first question comes from Colin DeMello. You can't really hear the question so much, but basically asks Doug Ford, why'd you say it in the first place? Like, dude.
I agree with Brandon.
You can articulate exactly why you felt the need to apologize today. What about your comments?
Well, you know, Colin, something, Colin, I sit back, I get passionate because I want to help people. That's what it is. And I speak from the heart, and sometimes my words don't come out properly, which I think you've all seen over a number of years. But I'm never too shy to go up, stand in front of the cameras, stand in front of, there's, about 30 chiefs in the room? 30, 40, somewhere around there? And say, my words that came out yesterday, this is what I'm trying to do, is prosperity. And I sincerely apologize if that has offended anyone. I've never been too proud to sit back and apologize for something that I've said or have offended someone. But at the end of the day, I want the communities to prosper. That's what I want. When I heard a lot of the needs, and not just from the group of chiefs that were here, but many other chiefs that need things in their communities. The way you do it is by prospering, working all together, and working collaboratively together. That's how we all prosper.
I understand
but
that, Premier,
yeah,
you're saying you're speaking from the heart, but the Grand Chief just said that it was interpreted as racist comments. So in your heart,
and you know something, I'm not going into that bear trap, Colin, because we had a very respectful meeting in there. They know exactly how I feel. I know exactly how they feel. And we're going to work together that everyone prospers. Everyone prospers. And
I'll clarify that. Mm-hmm. So I just want to add to that. Those meetings, in our view, were of that. And it are our chiefs today. While going to this meeting, we were, our chiefs, our rights holders, we're fulfilling their duty as a treaty partner to have those respectful dialogue and communications with the Crown. To be honest, we weren't expecting apology because of how we feel we've been treated. And so we acknowledged, all of our chiefs have acknowledged and accepted in that room today the Premier's apology. We were in that room, right? So in terms of misinformation, I will speak to that because journalists listen to everybody always speaking here and misinterpret some of those comments that become polarizing and become very, I guess, disrespectful in a way that allows society to be polarized against each other. We were clear with the Premier, and the Premier knows this, that these are treaty partners. Our nations are treaty partners, as is the Premier, and he has agreed to continue on with that dialogue, upholding that responsibility that he carries, and has apologized for the words that were used. Apologizing to a bunch of cameras is not that meaningful, but again, I can't, and he can't, eloquently describe what that room was today, but we are reserving our comments into the content and detail of that conversation to a later time to allow us to respect our rights holders, our chiefs, to have that dialogue and communication of what transpired today.
Last question.
Mr. Richter.
Could you talk about what you're...
So again here, Grand Chief coming in to offer some clarification to protect what actually happened in that room. Listen, I don't trust Doug Ford further than I can throw him, and I can't lift the guy up. All right. I am the first to say Doug Ford apologized. That's insincere. Because could be the case here. But the Grand Chief, whether the apology is sincere or not, we'll find that out in due course of time. But the Grand Chief here is offering him tons of grace, and she seems to be convinced that what happened in that room was a major step. She wasn't expecting Doug Ford to walk in that room and apologize based on everything she knows of him to be true. Now, yes, we can be cynical. And listen, I'm right down there with you. Right? It's like, oh, he's looking at his chance as prime minister going up in smoke. Oh, man, he's scared. Ooh, it's just, here we have Kit Frankie here. Smooth talk just enough for that compromise. You know what? Could be. Could very well be. But as well, as Kit PNC Bio mentions here, maybe it's because I'm old, but I remember a time when this wouldn't even have happened. To me, this is more of a voice than they've had in 20 years ago, even if I accept it's a pretty poorly delivered apology. Listen, Doug Ford is not used to making these types of apologies, so I don't expect him to knock it out of the park on his first try, especially given everything we know about him. But that he is there, that he went into the room and apologized, that he's apologizing before the cameras, which has whatever worth it has, as the Grand Chief says. But is standing there and taking it and basically sharing the mic with the Grand Chief. So I'd like to come and make a clarification. And she's like, she's put in and he steps aside. That is something I have never seen him do. So while I'm not ready to give him points on sincerity, because I am noticing one or two things that are atypical from what I know Doug Ford to do when a situation like this arrives. Yes, he still reverts back to his whole, like, nobody cares more than me and all that kind of stuff. Let's put it this way. He has a very limited range. Right? But I am, to me, this is new. He doesn't get a cookie. He doesn't get a cookie because his first instinct was to unhinge his jaw and make those comments in the first place. But I am recognizing that there are one or two things different than what Doug Ford usually does in this type of situation. Could be PR. Could be he had like a long meeting with Corey tonight and said, you need to do this, this, and that. And you need to do it in this way. And you need to not run your mouth and you need to, right? And again, could be all an act, could be political staging. Again, there's before this day and after this day, but this day is definitely going to be a marker. So what he does from this point on will let us know if this day actually was meaningful, part of a new approach that he is incorporating, or whether or not it's just a blip. Like this. And she's not taking Ford's bullshit, as Kitsasi says, yes, but she's also making sure that the media doesn't run with it and create a polarizing story. She's helping Doug Ford out a lot in this one. Because I am not sure that I would have had that amount of grace. This woman is spectacular. All right, let's. I believe there's a couple of more, one more minute. No, with regard to this, let me just check my timestamps. Yes, a little bit more on this before. There's a couple of other questions after, but then they relate to other things.
Specific concerns are about Bill 5. So if we could hear those, what are your actual concerns about Bill 5?
Again, today's meeting was a meeting requested of our rights holders, the chiefs within the Anishinaabe Nation. This meeting in particular wasn't all about Bill 5. It was about Ontario upholding their treaty responsibility. The Premier has corrected himself in the hat in hand comment and has committed to be working with us as a good treaty partner and has owned what he said. And I'm not going to belabor that, but also I think it would be disrespectful to our First Nations communities to suggest their only concern is Bill 5 at this time. So again, these dialogues, these conversations that are happening directly with our rights holders need to be kept safe. They need to be kept from being misinterpreted by journalists and misinterpretation by those who may read them. And, our First Nations within the Anishinaabe Nation will always support the treaty rights and responsibilities that we share. These were contractual agreements signed by our ancestors and the ancestors of Ontario to uphold and to continue a way forward. So our chiefs today were very grateful that the Premier agreed to this first meeting today, and we too are looking forward to ongoing dialogue with the Premier. He is a man of his word. He tells us, so we know that those dialogues will continue.
Premier,
Thank you.
Premier, can we ask you about Prime Minister Carney's
Thank you so much.
counter tariffs?
So, and then they get into counter tariffs and all that kind of stuff, which have to do with the topic there today. But yeah, as Kitsasi here says, the Grand Chief is guiding him now. Amazing. And in this last instance, whereas Doug Ford was like looking straight ahead and trying not to show anything, sort of zombieing out, when the Grand Chief was speaking in this last section, there were a couple of times where you could see him nodding his head, actually engaging with what she was saying as she was saying it, rather than standing there and it's like, oh, incoming, oh boy. So yeah, it is, yeah, like I said, she's very good at this, says Kit J. Yeah, very, very good at this. Yeah, and as Kit Linda M says, she's a Grand Chief. She's already the equivalent of a Prime Minister. Pretty much. Good point. Well stated. But yes, again, right? Kit Frankie, doesn't help that he always uses that cop-out. But I just want Ontario to prosper. Yeah. See, he has his rhetorical safety blankets, I call them, that he runs to. And that's for, like I said, his range is limited. Because, and he stretched a little here. Not the most elegant, not the most eloquent, right? But there's an attempt. What the motives behind them are fully will be revealed in the fullness of time, I'm sure, because this is the type of thing that only stands if there's consistency over time. right? But yeah, that's something. And that Kit Saucy here brings up a point here. Says that Poilievre apologized after Harper yelled at him for screwing the Conservatives' attempt at reconciliation. Yeah, and we know that that one was not sincere, right? Based on everything that he's done afterwards and said afterwards. I mean, he stole focus from Indigenous people on the day of the residential school apology. And then when the Pope came to deliver the church's apology, that's the day that Pierre announced to the media that he was, quote unquote, running for prime minister. So again, on a day of very great import to Indigenous Canadians, two of them, where they got apologies, one from the government and one from the church, Pierre did something to pull focus from that day. I think we know where he stands. And there is no level of apology that's going to happen that. Kit PNC Bio makes a good comment here. We can either encourage good behavior or assume the worst every time. I put my hand up as assuming the worst, but don't think it's very encouraging to those who try to change. One of the things I say now and then on the show is when somebody outstretches the hand, because when you outstretch yours to meet it, you can do one or two things. Take the hand, or as you're coming, raise it and smack them across the face. The Grand Chief extended the hand to the hand. Just gave him a couple smacks upside the head, though, verbally. There too. No doubt. But yeah, hopefully, cross fingers, that this is the beginning of maybe a slightly different Doug Ford when he speaks of Indigenous people. Maybe this was the one that rung his bell enough for him. But as Kid PNC Bio says, if it's insincere, he will show it sooner than later. And as Kit Linda M says here, we will see what happens when a project gets proposed that the chiefs do not support. And that there will be the real test. That will be the real test. Listen, Kit Saucy here makes a comment. A problem of our times demanding people to become better while telling them you can't change. Yeah, exactly. So I would like to encourage, if he got his bell rung a little bit and he felt it, I guess, and maybe had an aha moment, as one would say, I hope it sticks. I hope it sticks. So, and for the rest of it, we will see. We will see. But yeah, it's after he made those comments yesterday, the last thing I expected to see the very next day is him standing next to a Grand Chief. Yes. And serving himself up a slight piece of humble pie. Whether it's theater or not. I wouldn't even have expected him to do it for the purpose of theater. So, like I said, we will see what happens with this. All right. Very, very briefly, the Prime Minister yesterday also with regard to trade with the United States tried to put the screws a little bit to Donald Trump, stating that, because after the meeting, Donald Trump in his plane came back with the 51st state stuff, and stating it's like, we need a deal, we need a deal. Well, the Prime Minister being quite aware that Doug Ford is dealing with Donald Trump is like nailing Jello to a wall, but also taking some heat for the fact that there are no counter tariffs yet for steel and aluminum. And I can understand why he wouldn't want to do that prior to the G7 meeting. There's no point in inserting noise, but now that the meeting is over, there's still the NATO thing next week. But with that, maybe, how would I put it? But with the G7 itself as the host, not wanting to do anything that distracts from trying to have the smoothest event possible. But now that it's done, and Donald Trump said that particular thing, Mark Carney made a move. Some people would call a boss move, stating specifically that if there is no deal in the 30 days, as they seem to have sort of agreed at the G7 that there might be, then that's the date by which Canada would actually start putting in place the retaliatory counter tariffs to those to the extra 25% on steel and aluminium coming from the United States. So yeah, again, interesting move. Very rarely do we see a Prime Minister of Canada try to give the government of the United States a little bit of a push. Be interesting to see what happens with that. All right, kids and cubs, that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us because we love it when you do. Now, if you would like to make sure you do not miss an episode because you are a busy kid or a busy cub on the go, making the world a better place, or just taking care of your family, maybe even just taking some time for self-care. And, because sometimes you take a break from politics. That's okay. We always encourage you. If you need to leave us for a little bit because you need to put your mind at rest, that's okay. Just come back to us when you do, and we'll run this leg of the relay. But if you cannot sit down and watch us live or later, well then, take us with you because we're fun-sized and portable. And we have a podcast version, ears only, that you can download. And therefore, when you go on a jog or you're going to your latest protest or doing groceries or whatever, you can have us with you. You just scan that QR code and that will bring you to our pod page, podpage.com/thetruenortheagerbeaver with a hyphen between each one of those words. And if you click on subscribe, when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it comes directly to you. It's really that simple. We don't make it complicated. Now, if you would like to help us in other ways, kids and cubs, well, you can do that by grabbing your e-surfboard and hanging 10 all the way down to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page where we have 3 gnarly buttons for you. Like, share, and subscribe. Give them a little click. It's a lot of fun. And it helps us with the algorithm. So thank you. And if you are listening to us on podcast and you have the opportunity to give us stars and reviews, that also helps us with the algorithm, and we're very grateful when you do. If you would like to help us in yet other ways, kids and cubs, because we do incur some costs to bring this show to you, little financial contribution in the form of a donation to the Beaver Lodge Emergency Hydration Fund will do wonders to keep your favorite beaver moist. So, if you scan that QR code that just appeared in the corner there, that will bring you to our coffee page, coffee.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word. And there you can leave a little expression of encouragement to let us know that you would like us to do more. Also, if you go on our coffee page, our latest editorial is there. I wanted to talk about it on the show, but we're already at 2 hours and 20 minutes, so I won't go into it. But there's a little analysis from me about some comments that Pierre made with regard to house price to income ratio, and him trying to make the case that it's a very, very Trudeau bad. And we debunk that. So if you would like to take a little look at that, that would make us very happy indeed, kids and cubs. And I will take a moment to make sure that I post the link to that in the chat there. It's called An Exercise in Selective Editing, because Mr. Podiev decided to use a chart to illustrate his point, but he only used the chart starting from the time, to cover the time that Trudeau was in power, but not the 10 years before. so that people can see how we got to that place. So it is included in the chat there, and you can take a look at that. Hope you read it. Hope you share it. I'm trying to write more and hopefully draw more attention to the show that way, because I noticed that people like Evan Scrimshaw and David Moscrop and all of those people write and are able to build audiences that way. Not everybody likes podcasts specifically, so just trying a new medium and a new way to reach out to people to fulfill our mission of bringing some political and media literacy to people all around. So there's just some people who prefer to read, and I'm happy to serve in that way as well. So new initiative. Hopefully it is meeting with your approval. You are liking what it is that we are writing, and you are happy and enthusiastic about sharing it with your own circles, because as I keep on saying to you, you are all influencers in your own circle, right? So we appreciate your help with that. All right, because democracy is something that you do, kids and cubs. If you are in Alberta, there's by-election on Monday, June 23rd. You can vote in person at your assigned voting location. All voting locations will be open from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Advance voting is on. Today and tomorrow are the two last days. Advance voting started as early as the 17th. So electors may vote at any of the advanced voting locations in the electoral division. You can vote at the returning office if you're unable to vote at an advance or election day location. Your local returning office will take your vote, and they are open as early as May 26th, and they will be open through June 23rd. Office hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturdays, and 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on voting days. You can also request a special ballot and a voting package to use this application form, although it might be a little late for that because all special ballots must arrive to the returning office by 8 p.m. on the 23rd. So if you had one already, this might be the last day to put it in the mail if you want to arrive on time, but you probably won't be able to ask for one at this time and get it in on time. Also, if you want to donate to the Red Cross to help our fellow Canadians who have been affected by the wildfires, this is the last week to do it, where your donation will be matched. The Government of Canada and Government of Manitoba will be matching donations to the 2025 Manitoba Wildfires Appeal from May 28th to June 27th. Every $1 donated will become $3 to support the families and individuals most affected by the wildfires. And the Government of Canada will match donations to the Canadian Red Cross 2025 Saskatchewan Wildfires Appeal from May 30th to June 29th. And there, every $1 will become $2 because the Government of Saskatchewan, for some reason, decided not to participate in this program the way that the Government of Manitoba did. To donate, contact the Red Cross at 1-800-418-1111. That's 1-800-418-1111. Call now. Via email at wecare@redcross.ca. That's wecare, all in one word, at redcross.ca, or online at www.redcross.ca. There you go. Words of wisdom, kids and cubs. You know what? It's Friday. So whatever you do this weekend, and however you do it, throw yourself a little party. Now, if that party just means having a nice soak in the hot tub while you listen to some beautiful music with the lights down and maybe some candles up, whether doing that is having a couple of friends over on the back patio for a barbecue, whether it means going out and visiting a museum with your kids, or going camping, or anything. But throw yourself a little party, because you deserve it. I know I will. This weekend, I've got some hot chocolate with my name on it, and I'm definitely going to be taking a me moment at some point today. So treat yourself. You deserve it. You work hard. And life's tough enough. So create a good moment. All right, kids and cubs. Please be kind and gentle to yourself. I'll have a little bit of an Easter egg for you. But before we go to that, it's audience participation time. At the count of 3, I think you know the magic words, but in case you're new here, they are Mr. Beaver, please cue the cock. On 1, 2, 3. Oh, dang. I think I heard some drumming in there too. Good stuff. Well, absolutely. Here you go. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. All right, kids and cubs, we have a couple of things for you today about Canadians who make us proud. And the first one shout out goes to Canada's First Lady of the Guitar, Miss Lloyd. If you have never had a chance to see her in concert, please do. She's absolutely delightful and fascinating. But Leona Boyd got inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame on June 14th. So yes, congratulations to her. That's an absolutely wonderful and a great high honor that she has been offered in that case, and much deserved after a very long and very prolific career. Also, some congratulations go out to Canada's under 20 women's soccer team, who not only were crowned the champions of the CONCACAF tournament, which we had reported on, but in addition to that, Team Canada was offered the Fair Play Award at the tournament. Is absolutely fantastic and very welcome, considering the recent controversy from Soccer Canada staff at the Paralympics. So it's nice to see Canadian soccer players being held up again as champions, not only on the field, but champions of fair play. So, ladies, thank you, not only for winning, but doing an important bit to restore our honor. We are extremely proud. Well done. Also, at the Under 16 Women's America's Basketball Championship happening, Canada has played its 3 rounds in pool play, winning all 3 with a very, very, I don't know what the word to use for it, crushing 107-15 win against Panama. Whew, that must not have been fun for the players from Panama. And advanced to the quarterfinal, where they will be playing Puerto Rico today at 5 p.m. So we should definitely give them a cheer. All right. This one, before we go, a little bit of a laugh. Somebody stated something on Twitter the other day that with regard to Donald Trump coming to the G7 and then leaving earlier, that on the day I saw that, I was like, okay, we have a winner here. You won the internet today. And this was what was said. Canada, he was a gift. It's rude to return him. It's like, well, one, nice try, points for creativity, and two, and I say this, uh, maybe if we can't return them, maybe we can regift them, like fruitcake. And for all the fruitcake lovers out there, trust me, I get you. I'm one of those weird freaks who doesn't regift fruitcake either. I kind of like it, although I've not stumbled upon one I can eat for the longest time, given that I'm gluten-free now. But yes, when fruitcake was the thing around Christmas time, I was the first one face down in it while everybody was just walking by it. I like fruitcake. What can I say? So yeah, that provoked a little bit of a laugh. And the last one I have for you kids today is more like a ooh, ah, oh moment. Because yes, June is a month where we celebrate many things and recognize many things, such as Indigenous History Month, and of course, Men's Mental Health Month. But of course, as we mentioned, and as we all know, it is also Pride Month. And Niagara Falls, Kids and Cubs, was lit up for the month to recognize Pride. And I think that this here is an absolutely just beautiful. Whoops, I do not know what is going on here. But for some reason, I cannot seem to get to the screen to recognize the page that I want to show you. There we go. Look at that, Kids and Cubs. That's gorgeous view of Niagara Falls. For those who are listening, I'm able to place some lights under the Horseshoe Falls to make a rainbow color pattern there, and that's how they are marking Pride. Just a wonderfully beautiful and creative way to show some allyship. So thank you to anyone who was involved in that. There you go, Kids and Cubs. That's all I got for you today. Be merry, and we will see you on Monday. Amour et gros, gros, gros bisous. Mwah. And now, like magic, poof, I'm gone.